We're talking today with Ray Anderson of Muskegon, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Ray, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Well, I graduated from high school.
Where and when were you born?
Here in Muskegon.
Okay, in what year?
1925.
Okay, and so you grew up here?
Yes.
Okay, what did your family do for a living when you were a kid?
My dad was always a salt filer.
Okay.
He worked for the curtain roll.
Okay, and did he have a job through the 30s?
Yes. Low paying job, but a job.
Okay. All right. And then how many kids were in your family?
3.
Okay.
I have an older brother and a sister that's 15 years younger.
Okay. All right. And then do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I went to a movie, and when I come out of the movie, it was all over the street. And that was the day that Pearl Harbor was bombed.
All right. Now, at that point, you were only 16 years old. So,
yes.
So you were a little too young to be in the military. Now, did you want to go and enlist, or did you figure you would wait your turn?
I stayed in high school, and I volunteered in the 12th grade for the Air Force. And they sent me to Detroit for physical, and I had my papers from my physical and my test, and I had passed them all. And they said, just go home and wait for word. And when I got word, it said to load up on a train, and they sent me to Texas. And when I got off the train, I showed them my papers, and they said, throw them in a waste paper basket. You're in the Army. You're in the infantry. And I was in there with a bunch of old men, 27, 28 years old. We'd go on a phase force march. Half of them would drop out.
Okay. Now, let's back up a little bit. When did you go to Texas? Was that the summer of 44?
Yes, 43.
We have that.
I can't say exactly,
Okay.
but around October or November.
Okay. Because yeah, you would have turned 18 by then, and so they just went ahead and drafted you.
Yes.
Okay, that's 43. All right. And do you remember what base you were at in Texas? Which camp was it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Do you have an idea?
It was Tyler, Texas.
Okay.
Was a city, but the camp I can't tell you.
All right. Well, we'll probably be able to figure that one out.
Okay.
Because if we know it was near Tyler, then
Yep.
we can sort that out when we process the interview. Okay. So that's East Texas. So that's in the eastern part of Texas, or northeast, that area. Okay. All right. So you're there. And so you're with a bunch of other draftees, and you said a lot of them were older than you.
Yes.
And was there a group that was about your age too? So you had
Yes.
young guys and old guys?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And talk about what do you remember about the first few days in that camp? When you got there, what did they do with you?
Just fed me, and we went on marches and
Okay.
fired a rifle.
All right. But they gave you a uniform and that kind of thing.
Yep.
All right. And then how did the drill sergeants treat you?
How did what?
How did the drill sergeants treat you?
No problem. I really almost enjoyed the Army
Mm-hmm.
because when I went to school, I always had a job. And when I was in 12th grade, I was working at Continental Aviation. And I was putting in an 8-hour shift at night and going to 12th grade, and it was a chore.
Okay.
So the Army was really a relief for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you didn't work 16 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And about how long did you stay at the camp in Texas?
About 3 months,
Okay.
about 90-day wonder.
Mm-hmm.
You're ready for battle.
All right. And then where did you go after that?
I volunteered for the paratroop to get out of there.
Okay. Now, so if you hadn't volunteered for the paratroopers, would you just have stayed there longer?
I would have been in Germany
Okay.
because some of the guys that I graduated with went to Germany.
Right. Because they were, a lot of the men in the training were being sent right over as replacements,
Yes.
especially because now, you know, you're getting into early 1945. That's the time of the Battle of the Bulge, and they needed people.
Yeah.
So a lot of men were being sent over. So you joined the paratroopers instead. Okay. And then where do you go next?
First I went to Fort Bragg, where I got my training for the paratrooper.
Okay. Now describe what that training was like.
I had never ridden in a plane before.
Mm-hmm.
My first trip in a plane. And we loaded up to make our first jump. And to my surprise, the jump master graduated a year ahead of me in high school. And he was a fullback and a football star.
Mm-hmm.
And they put him in a cadre to train
Mm-hmm.
because of that.
Okay.
And we got up in the air and was ready to make our first jump. And he said, stand up and hook up. And about 20 of us. And everybody stood up and hooked up. One of the guys unhooked and sat down. And the jump master, that's paratrooper that I knew, come walking back there and he said, what's the problem? He said, I quit. And they carried him to the door. And last I remember, he was still hollering no when he went out the door. And then he turned around and he said, now anybody else want to quit? So we all jumped.
Mm-hmm. Now, did that guy survive?
As far as I know, I never seen him again.
Okay.
I don't know if he quit or if he. There was so many of us
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know.
Okay. So what do you remember about your first jump? What happened? So you go out the door of the plane,
Yeah.
and then what happens?
Just we had to make 7 jumps to get our wings,
Okay.
and I made our 7 jumps, and then I took tests, and they asked me if I'd like to be in the demolition squad.
Okay. I'd like to back up a little bit and talk a little bit more about the paratrooper training. Because paratrooper training has become famous. There's things like Band of Brothers and all of that. And it gets presented to us as being very tough physical training.
Well, if you could run, you could be a paratrooper.
Okay. And then did you have to practice jumps off of a platform or something?
There was a tower,
Okay.
about a 30-foot tower, and we jumped into a static and rolled down and practiced landing.
Okay.
And there was a way to roll so you didn't get hurt when you come.
Right. Okay. And then when you jumped out of the airplane, did the parachute open automatically?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
And it's like your plane is doing over 100 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And when you jump out of there, it's like sitting on a windstorm. You just almost sit there, and your chute comes out and opens up in front of you, and then you swing underneath it.
All right. Okay. And now, were you scared the first time?
I imagine.
Okay.
Sure, I imagine it was. And I don't know if you really ever get over it. You always have butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
I had 33 jumps, and I can't say I ever jumped without butterflies.
Okay. But you still jumped.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, when you were training, did they have you do any night jumps, or were they all during the day?
They was all day jumping.
Okay. All right.
Except when I got into the 542nd, then we made a lot of night jumps.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, about how long did you spend doing the paratrooper training?
Probably about 3 months.
Okay. So now we're getting farther into 1945. So maybe April, May in there when you finish?
It's still 1944.
That's right. That's right. I'm a year off. You're right. So you're still 44 at that point. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you finish your paratroop training before D-Day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're still doing that. Okay. So you finish your training, and then what happens to you?
Took an aptitude test.
Right. That's the demolitions part. Yeah.
And trained for a demolitionist.
Okay. So what was that training like?
All kinds of explosives. Everything but dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't handle dynamite because it's got nitro glycerin in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it pools and it can get touchy. So we use TNT, we use nitro starch, we use ammonium nitrate, tetra, we used everything.
All right. And
But dynamite.
okay. And then what kinds of things were you trained to blow up?
Wood, metal, earth,
I don't know. Things like bridges?
yep,
Okay.
cement,
Okay. And then where did you do that training?
Camp Mackall,
Okay. And what state is that in?
North Carolina.
Camp Mackall, North Carolina. All right. And the other guys who were training with you, did you learn anything about them or where they were from?
Oh yes. I met some real nice guys in the 42nd.
Okay. And were they about your age, most of them? Or were some of them older?
I kept in contact with them for years,
Okay.
but most of them have died.
Yeah. Now, were most of them about your age?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And about how many were in your battalion when you joined it?
A battalion has 200
Okay. All right.
in a company,
Okay.
and there's 4 companies to a battalion, so there was 800 men in a battalion.
Okay. All right. And is that basically, did you just stay with them for the rest of the war? Or what happens? Or does do some of them go over to Europe or to the Pacific or?
The paratroopers would request replacement,
Okay.
and the older people that had more training would usually go overseas,
Okay.
and they would move us up. And the second time they took replacement, they took the lower men and left us retrain the incoming people again.
Okay. So you would kind of by accident become the old guys, but now they needed you
Yeah.
to do that. All right. And then did you basically spend,
That's my daughter.
okay, cool. If you wanted to cut across, you can do
Yes,
that.
I don't want to mess up your camera.
All right.
Janet.
Hi.
Okay. So now your job is more training the new guys as they come in. All right. And then,
And demolitions mainly.
right. And then did some of those newer guys then also get sent off? Or were there only 2 drafts out of your battalion?
I think 3 times
Okay.
we put replacements in for the 101st and the 82nd.
Yeah. And there were some units that went to the Pacific that got involved at the very end too.
There was paratroopers in the Pacific, but few.
Yeah.
Most of them were in Europe.
Right. There were 3 divisions in Europe in the
Yeah.
end. So yeah. Okay. So you're basically there in North Carolina for a good long period of time. What was your daily routine like while you were there? You get up in the morning. What do you do?
Run. Run before breakfast, an hour, and they had breakfast. And then we had all kinds of training, different weapons, tank mines, a lot of it was demolition.
All right. And then you made more jumps?
Oh yeah. Our basic duty, once we were established, was whatever the problems the paratroopers were having, we tried to solve them. And one of the problems they had was finding their demolition after they jumped. They put in a separate parachute, threw it out the door and couldn't find it. So we put bags on our jumpsuit, and we carried 20 pounds on each sleigh, and that solved that problem. But the detonating cap is the thing you got to be careful of, and we put bubble around our ankles, laid the caps in that and taped it.
Okay.
And of course our boots were 8-inch boots. And we saved the cap that way. We didn't have any accident.
All right.
So we solved that. And then of course the big problem was jumping at night. Paratroopers always made a night jump. And they couldn't find each other. And we tried to solve that time and time again. I made probably 15 night jumps trying to solve that problem. Never solved it. Never solved it.
Okay. Well, do you remember what they experimented, what they tried to do to solve the problem?
The clickers. They tried that. The enemy caught on to that. Of course, we didn't have radio. Couldn't use lights. And we tried jumping low altitude. So we'd be closer together.
Right.
And of course about 20 men would jump in a stick. And we would try to assemble on the middle man of that stick.
Right.
And he would stay put and the 2 ends would move in and try to find him. And then we'd get hung up in trees. And that was another thing that we solved. All we had to do was get rope. And we always carried a rope on our belt. so we could tie it off in the tree and come down the rope.
Okay.
And that was another, and jumping with the flamethrower was another thing. You couldn't find it.
Okay. So the man carrying the flamethrower can't have that on his back while he's jumping out of the plane.
But we did.
Okay.
Our staff sergeant was a character.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to the riggers and had a harness made up for that flamethrower. And we started jumping with it.
Did it work?
It worked.
All right. So you were right there in doing research and development for the paratroopers.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was our main duty,
Okay.
to solve the problem.
All right. And so what did you do when you were off duty?
Went to town, stayed at a hotel, rode a bus back to camp. I was only off Saturday and Sunday. We usually had an inspection on Saturday morning, and they turned us loose at noon.
Mm-hmm.
Time we get to town, found a place to stay. He didn't have much time. He would have to get back on that bus about noon on Sunday to get back to camp.
Okay. So what town did you go to? What was the town?
Charlotte.
Okay. So
Charlotte was a big Greenwich,
Greensboro, maybe?
Greensboro.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That was the two.
Okay. And can you tell us what you did in town? Or do you not want to?
Worked the street looking for girls.
There you go. And how did the people in the town treat the soldiers?
They were fine.
Okay.
I have to tell you a story about that. I hitchhiked into town one time, and an ambulance stopped, picked me up. And he says, "You look pretty beat." He says, "Why don't you go back there and lay down on the couch?" So I did. I went sound to sleep. We got into Charlotte, and he reached back and woke me up, and he says, "Where do you want to get out?" And I said, "This will do." So I opened up the back door and jumped out, and people were staring like crazy because I jumped out of the back end of that ambulance. But that's one of the stories.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, would you usually go with a group of friends, or did you go by yourself?
I usually went by myself. Well, maybe one friend.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, did you get to go back home at all?
I got home one Christmas,
Okay.
and I took a train up to Washington, D.C., and Washington to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh home.
Mm-hmm.
And I hitchhiked home from Detroit.
Wow. Okay.
And some lady picked me up and scared me to death driving. I was glad to get out of her car. She said my husband would kill me if he thought I was picking up a hitchhiker. I said, "Lady, you're going to die anyway by the way you drive."
So she was more dangerous than you were.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, you're there, you told us you didn't get discharged until 1946.
Yes.
So you stay in the Army about a year after the war ends in Europe. Do you remember hearing about the war in Germany ending?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
And I had a fifth of whiskey in my foot locker. And everybody knew because North Carolina was dry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I got it, but I had a fifth of whiskey and everybody knew it. So when the war was over in Germany, I had to break out my whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And it was gone.
Sure. All right. But then the war was still going on with Japan.
Yes.
Did you think that you might have to go there?
We figured we'd be next. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. But you didn't have orders to go to the Pacific yet.
No.
Okay. So you're still waiting on that, and then.
Thank God for the atomic bomb.
Okay. And did you hear about the atomic bomb before you heard about the Japanese surrender?
No.
Because they're pretty close together there.
I don't recall that. But I was surprised that Japan didn't surrender after the first bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Why they needed a second one is beyond me, but they did.
All right. Now, once Japan was out of the war, did you figure you'd get to go home?
Oh yeah.
So what did they tell you?
We mustered out, we had a point system.
Okay.
And when your points was up, you got mustered out.
All right. And you didn't have points for being overseas or being in combat.
Right.
Yeah. So even though you'd been in for a while.
I just had points for being in the service.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any credit for being a paratrooper?
No.
No. Okay. So even though that's a little bit more dangerous than some other stuff.
We got $50 a month for that.
Yeah. That was pretty good then. All right. Now, while you were in the Army and you're living in North Carolina, did you write home or did people write to you?
Oh yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And who did you write to?
Oh, mainly a girlfriend.
Okay. All right.
I eventually married her.
All right. And did they send you packages or gifts or things?
Everybody got. My dad was a knife. He worked on big bandsaws,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd make knives out of that.
Okay.
And he made me a knife,
Mm-hmm.
and the guys seen it. Of course, they all wanted a knife. So he started making knives for everybody.
Okay.
And my mother knitted me a sweater.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it was army color.
Mm-hmm.
But the guys seen that, and they wanted to, they'd make one for her, from her. She'd make them one.
Okay.
So she knitted sweaters for the guys.
All right. Now, if you think back at the time that you spent there with the 542nd, are there other particular memories that stand out for you?
The thing that stands out is the night jumps and trying to assemble.
Mm-hmm.
That was always a disappointment to think that we couldn't solve that. We might have helped some, but we never solved it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they ever did.
No.
No, they jumped during the day a lot by the end of the war.
Yeah, it was a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
They jumped in Netherlands.
They jumped during the day in the Netherlands.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Germans found out about it through the gliders.
Mm-hmm.
They told not to bring any maps or anything about it. And one of the captains hid the instructions in his hat, and the Germans found it.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew where we were going to jump.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first landings were basically a surprise, but there were still too many Germans around. And then they learned the other stuff like that. And then when the gliders were supposed to come in, sometimes they were already there. But yeah. So Yeah, but that was in a way that wasn't your fault.
No,
No, that was someone else's problem. Yeah, it was a hard business.
I turned my ankle and hurt my ankle real bad.
Okay,
And I was on crutches.
okay,
And they put me in the glider group for a couple of months till my ankle got better.
okay. And did you ever practice landing in a glider?
Yes.
And what was that like?
It's scary because they bring that glider in straight, and when they get close to the ground, they slow it down by slipping it. And they wait until they're right next to the ground and straighten that thing out. And that's scary. Of course, they're used to it, you know, they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Did the gliders have skids on the bottom of any kind, or
Wheels.
yeah, they had wheels. Okay.
And skids,
Okay.
depending on where they were going to land them.
All right. So how many times did you have to land in a glider?
Probably, I was with them for a couple months. Probably 6, 8 times.
Okay, that sounds like enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We put demonstrations on, and the Air Force would pick the glider up, would pick 2 poles up, and the rope on the glider was split and went up both poles and made a circle. And the plane would come in with a hook and hook that. And in just a second or two, you were doing 100 miles an hour. And you had to lay down on your belly and hold on to something and hope your fingers didn't straighten out. Because you were jerked right off going.
Right. Now, when you used a glider, did the demolitions team bring more equipment? Did you have more stuff in a glider?
They carried jeeps and artillery.
But I mean, for demolition equipment, did you still have the same stuff?
No. Demolition was strictly paratroop.
Okay.
For me.
Okay. So you weren't the demolitions guy for the glider unit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So are there stories he's leaving out?
I don't think we're doing good.
Okay. All right. And then, so how do you learn that you're going home?
How do what?
How did you learn that you were going home, that your enlistment was up?
I knew my point system, and my points were getting close.
Okay.
When I got my points, I come home.
All right. Okay. Did the Army make any effort to encourage you to stay?
Oh yeah.
What did they offer you?
Staff sergeant rating,
Okay.
and I had to sign up for, I think, 3 years. And I wanted to go to school.
Okay.
I wanted to be an electrical engineer. My high school education leaned to that. I took college prep. And I took all of the math I could get and all of science I could get, physics, and that's why I signed up for that. I figured the least I could do would be a navigator with my math.
Right.
Because I had spherical trig and college algebra, and I had a lot of math.
Yeah.
And I figured at least I'd get to be a navigator. And it was a big disappointment when I showed my papers. They said, throw in the waste paper basket, you're in the Army.
Yeah.
They needed a body, and I was a body.
That's right. Yeah. If you had gone in 6 months earlier, you probably would have gotten flight training.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That happens. Okay. So when do you get out of the Army?
May of 46.
Okay. All right. And then
I went back to school
Okay.
in September.
Okay. And what school did you go to?
Muskegon High School.
Okay, so you hadn't finished high school before you left?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you do that.
And those that didn't finish high school, they volunteered and got their assignments.
Mm-hmm.
But if I waited, and I was drafted.
Mm-hmm.
And I was drafted 2 weeks after I graduated.
Okay. So you were already a high school graduate, but you went back to high school to take some more classes?
No.
Okay. Because it says you said you got home and you went to school.
After I got home,
Yeah.
I went to college.
College. Okay. Yeah. What college did you go to?
Muskegon.
Okay. So what is now Muskegon Community College?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it a junior college then, or?
Just 2 years.
Yeah, 2-year college. Yeah. Okay.
And I went down to consumers
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to be an electrical engineer. And I asked him if there was any work I could do for the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, sure. They put me to work. And I told them it would just be for the summer. And after I worked for 3 months, I had a little money in my pocket. And I come from a pretty poor family.
Mhm.
I didn't have any help at all.
Yeah.
And I had a little money in my pocket, and I figured, well, another year. And that turned out to be 40 years for the power company.
Okay. So what kind of work did you do for the power company?
Lineman,
Okay. And you did that for 40 years?
yes.
Okay. Did you become,
Well,
or were you a supervisor later? Or?
I made supervisor at 39.
Mhm.
When I was 39 years old.
Right.
And I worked till 62
Mhm.
and retired.
Okay. All right. So when you think about the time that you spent in the Army, how do you think that affected you, or what did you learn from it?
I really pretty much enjoyed it because my meals were free, my clothes were free, housing was free, and I was making $50 a month for jumping
Mm-hmm.
and $68 a month for being a corporal. I would get $118. What did I do with it?
Yeah.
That was big money for me.
Okay. So it was a good job, and the people treated you decently?
Yep.
Yeah.
I really pretty much enjoyed the Army life,
Okay.
but I wanted an education.
Right. Yeah. So you served your country and you went home.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much then for taking the time to share the story today. This always happens. I'm going to catch this. Okay. Go ahead.
I'll have to tell you an experience I had jumping in Chicago. We was selling bond tours, part of
Okay.
it, and we put a demonstration on. And we go to an airport and put a demonstration. And we fell out one morning to get on a plane, and everybody figured it was too windy. We won't be jumping today. Load up. We jumped. And I had a habit of being the last one out for some reason. I don't know why, but I was always the last man. And I had my back to the field, and I looked behind me, and I could see the field, and you can slide a parachute. You can steer them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I started slipping towards that field. First thing I knew, I was covered in silk. The man behind me, I dropped in his chute.
Oh.
And I don't remember panicking. All I do is remember is just pulling silk. And I slid off from his chute. And when I did, his chute was taking all my air. My chute was collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
And I dropped it underneath my chute and got air again. And the road along the airport was lined with sightseers.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked my feet up to get over a car, and I bounced off in the hood. And the airfield was fenced in. And that wind chute, my chute went across the fence, dragged me into that fence, and I was pinned. I couldn't move, couldn't get out. Some guy come up and he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Dump the air out of that chute." So he did. He went across the fence, got a hold of the chute, dumped the air out of it, and I could get out of my harness, go do my thing.
All right. So now that airfield where you landed, does that still exist, or is that gone now?
George Field. I
Okay.
can't tell you.
Yeah. So
It was George Field where we jumped.
and I've not heard of that, and I'm from Chicago. So it wasn't like what became Midway Airport or anything like that.
It was George Field.
Okay. All right.
And flying there, we had 47s.
Mm-hmm. So C-47 aircraft. Yeah.
And they could not gain altitude with one engine. And we lost an engine flying from North Carolina to Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And we went through the mountains in Kentucky and Tennessee, zigzagging, because they couldn't get over.
Okay.
And he says, "Stand up and hook up, and if you get the green light, get out." And he made it into Chicago on one engine.
Wow.
They took that plane up the next day after they worked on the engine, and it crashed. Killed 3 men.
Mm-hmm. So you got lucky.
I got lucky.
Wow.
Again.
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 All right. Okay. Well, have you got any other stories? Before I turn the machine off again.
That's pretty basically it.
Okay.
There was a lot of things that happened, but
Well,
probably stories that shouldn't be told.
that's your choice. Okay.
We had a staff sergeant that we'd have followed him any place. He had an Irishman. And we were limited to size because of height and weight
Right.
in the plane. And we had one fellow in a company that was a little bigger. He grew up a little after he got in there. And he sat at the table next to us, drinking beer. And he said, "There isn't a man in this outfit that could take me." And of course, my staff sergeant heard him.
Mm-hmm.
And he poked me. You hear what he said? "Yeah, forget it, Mac." You hear what he said? Forget it. Pretty soon he got up and he tapped him on the shoulder. He says, "I understand there's a man in this outfit that could take you." He says, "You want to try me?" So outdoors they go. The big fellow picked himself up off the ground the second time. He said, "Let me buy you a beer."
Probably a good choice.
He had enough. But that's some of the things that
Yeah.
happened, you know.
Sort of life in the Army. Yeah. All right.